So welcome to today's session where we are going to look at retention policies to read retention enforcement, and we'll look at it from different vantage points. We have filerskeepers, BigID, and the Nordic Information Council here available with us. And firstly, to understand what we're going to do today, we'll run you through a quick agenda here. And from our standpoint, we'll be ensuring that we are recording today's session so you can rewatch it later and also share it. Likewise, we would love to hear all your thoughts. So ask as many questions as you like via the Q&A section. And please feel free to be relaxed, and thanks for joining us today. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and here we start. To give you a quick introduction, first let me introduce the people on the stage. We have Van, we have Peter, and we have myself. I'm Sai. So I'll let Van introduce himself first. Over to you, Van.
Yes, thank you, Sai. So hi, everyone. I'm Wanne Pemelaar. I'm the co-founder and currently CEO for filerskeepers. And what we do is we read all the laws in the world, and then we take from their rules that tell companies how long they should store their records and data. And then we help apply those rules to the records and data of our clients, first and foremost, by building what we call global retention schedules. We have a dashboard where you can say, hey, I'm in these jurisdictions, these industries, build me a bespoke retention schedule. And then we do that. We can calculate what's the most optimal retention period, given all the countries and states you're in. And then we can keep that up to date. So when the law changes, we can send an update and we can say, hey, the law has changed. Do you accept or decline? Then the user stays in control. And now that everybody has an up-to-date retention schedule with us, the question is, now what? And then I say, well, now you implement. So a lot of our clients are now interested in kind of connecting this to their data sources and to making this real, basically. So that's where I'll hand it over to Peter.
Thank you.
All right, Peter Boström is that's me. I'm one of the several founders, and I'm the CEO of the company Nordic Information Control. We're a company also on the tech side, where our target is to make information security and compliance as easy as possible for the user. So we're delivering a SaaS. Basically, what we do is catalog and classify information. We're drawing the map, what information is where, out of everything we have here, what is sensitive, from what perspective, and the most important question of all, how is it treated and how is it processed? So that's what we do. We're trying to make life easy for our customers as much as possible.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Peter. And finally, it's my turn. My name is Sai Pawan Kumar. I'm the team lead and the solution architect from BigID. And as an organization, BigID helps organizations connect the dots across data and artificial intelligence for security, privacy, compliance, and also AI data management. We enable our customers to find, understand, manage, protect, and take action on high risk and high value data wherever it lives. All right, so with this, we'll proceed further into the presentation, where we're going to have a detailed conversation in terms of what we're going to be presented with respect to the enterprise-wise data discovery and classification. We'll also look at some of the defensible retention and deletion aligned to legal obligations, and also a continuous reinforcement across all the cloud, SaaS, and legacy environments. With that, let me take charge here to present to you from the BigID's angle first. We'll understand what is BigID's data retention, how we are coming into the gameplay, what we bring onto the table, what feature sets are available. So to begin with, firstly, we need to understand what we're going to look at from the BigID retention capabilities and how we are able to help organizations achieve a complete and consistent data management for risk reduction and regulatory compliance. Let's get started there. So firstly, BigID's retention solution empowers organizations like yourself to seamlessly enforce all the retention policies, streamline workflows, and efficiently monitor all the policy compliances. Now, the goal here is to ensure that we are moving forwards to a policy-driven approach so that we are managing all the data retention across the organization without any hiccups. Now, what makes this journey very powerful is that BigID provides a single pane of glass or centralized platform where you can define, manage, enforce all your retention policies And instead of relying on multiple tools or different throats to choke, you will have a single throat to choke kind of an approach where organizations can create your own data retention rules. You can define and design your own tailored policies, apply them, and consistently look at the output across all your data types and also your data sources. Right. In particular times, this means that the platform helps you identify and investigate instances where data may be retained for a longer time than it should be. So once we find these kind of violations, or when we stumble across these or we detect these, we enable you to have a proactive remediation methodology where we often give you suggestions in terms of how you solve the issue. So if I walked up and I said, here is an organizational gap in terms of a compliance or retention or remediation requirement, that's first half of the information. The second half is going to be, how do we resolve this? Because providing information is not solving it. So first half is information, second half is how do you solve it? So beyond that, what we allow organizations to do is simple methodologies like apply uniform retention policies, customize and automate your granular retention policies that you created, centralize everything for your deletion workflows, and create automation into this whole gameplay. Ensure your global compliance is being met by using all dynamic rules that you have set as an organization. And finally, by identifying and removing all the unnecessary and outdated data or redundant, obsolete, trivial data, you as an organization can reduce all the storage costs and also save from exposing or lowering your risk exposure. In summary, I would simply put it as BigID's retention capabilities will help you as an organization to gain control over the data lifecycle, ensuring that data is kept only for as long as it's necessary and managed consistently and deleted whenever it's not necessary, right? So those are the elements that we cover. And when we look at this as a continuation in terms of the use cases that BigID addresses here and what value we bring to the organization, the first use case is going to be, how do we shrink your attack surface? So one of the biggest risks that I have noticed in the past is organizations face a very simple holding too much of data kind of an exercise every day. And especially if this data is sensitive, personal, or regulated information that is no longer required for your business purposes, it kind of opens a different can of worms. So this is where BigID helps you identify what data is necessary, what data is unnecessary, and how do we safely remove it from your estate after all the approval process and safety nets have been applied, so that we can significantly reduce the amount of sensitive data your organization could be processing or potentially being exposed to, even in terms of causing a breach or compromise of data. Now, the second use case that we look at is meeting all the legal and compliance mandate. So when organizations often need to comply with different data retention regulations across multiple regions or jurisdictions or geographical locations, or even for regulation perspectives, we will take all those inputs into account. BigID tool is already pre-built with all these. So we enable you to go ahead and apply all these dynamic geographical specific retention rules or regulation-based retention rules, giving you all the timelines so that you understand how long this data needs to be held and how long the data can be retained or the data needs to be deleted or got rid of. It's not just about deleting the data. If there is some other aspect that you want to move the data for a temporary time being or archive the data, there are certain tools or parameters that we provide as well. But again, taking into account the redundant, obsolete, trivial data, legal hold data, or crown jewel data, or filerskeepers, you need to ensure that you're only keeping it or retaining it for a certain given amount of time. And following by that, we have another important use case here, which is more about accelerating your data lifecycle management. So we as BigID help you as an organization to quickly discover and pinpoint what data must be retained and distinguish it from the data that can be safely deleted. And by doing this, we are able to precisely use all the information that is within the organization so that you implement a broader data lifecycle initiatives and ensure that data is properly being governed within your organization. And finally, BigID helps you reduce all the storage costs and avoid regulatory fines by identifying and eliminating data that's no longer needed for an organization. So significantly reduces your storage costs and also saves you from any costly penalties in case of any non-compliance with all the retention regulations that you may incur. So overall, these are the use cases that BigID would demonstrate, and how the retention capabilities not only improve your security and compliance, but also help organizations operate efficiently and reduce all these unnecessary costs. And the final feather on the, excuse me, and the final feather that we're going to address here are going to be what are the strategic outcomes that BigID will bring into the table, right? So when we look at it from the key use cases versus the strategic outcomes, we have three different elements here. The first outcome is to achieve consistent retention management. So when organizations today are storing data across multiple environments, so we are talking about on-premise, clouds, structured databases, unstructured databases, semi-structured data sources, managing all the retention across all these environments becomes very complex and inconsistent. What we do as BigID is we help you solve this by applying complete and consistent retention policies across all your data, regardless of where it resides. It could be a database, it could be an unstructured data source like an SMB share or a file share or any other data source. We are able to join these dots to portray a bigger picture and connect all the dots to give you that insightful picture so that you're able to retain only data that is actually needed. Now, it also brings together the legal, IT, security, and business teams under one single unified platform, right? Where we are essentially looking at all these angles or vantage points through one single pane of glass. And this is where we ensure that retention policies are being defined by different departments, but are being aligned and synchronized as one single organization, reducing all your costs, ensuring everybody is operating under the same governance framework and meeting all your frameworks, regulatory requirements, compliance, and also any risk factors that you may bring into the table. Continuation on that is going to be the second strategic outcome, which is the ability to automate and configure these retention policies. Right. So when organizations define and customize the granular retention policies, this allows us as a team to precisely determine what kind of data can be retained, how long it should be retained, who owns it, why are they owning the ownership, are we sharing it with any third party? If yes, who's that third party? How long is the third party going to have this information with them? So to identify all these elements and then apply a policy logic to identify data that has been deleted or should be deleted, which is no longer related, we kind of create that whole workflow mechanism for you. So the data comes into the organization, we know what kind of data we are dealing with, how long it should be kept. And as soon as it hits the retention cycle or the requirement or the condition, we start processing it to the next stage. And then finally, you have streamlining the retention and deletion workflows, which comes as the third strategic moment here, where we are able to centralize all the retention policy findings, the risks, the violations that we have identified, and make it much more easier for you in terms of adaptability so that you can prioritize on issues, investigate any potential violations that may occur. And now you're in the driving seat, so you can start taking the actions quickly. Now, from here on, organizations can automatically trigger actions. They can drive different set of actions in terms of meeting the requirements, not meeting the requirements, where are the red flags, and how do you convert these red flags into green flags? That's all the mechanism that we bring onto the table. Now, if you look at the diagram here, it's kind of a process flow where we are actually seeing what exactly is happening from the strategical point, right? So we have a complete journey here where we are able to discover and classify and inventory all the data. Once that is defined, we follow it with the definition of a data set where we are applying all the retention rules and the policies according to your legal, business, or IT regulatory requirements. As an organization, you would dictate these terms. And then finally, we are going to automatically apply all those policies, comply with them, and also apply all the retention rules. So data which is ROT or redundant, obsolete, trivial data goes through a different retention cycle, whereas crown jewel or legal data or filerskeepers sake of data will go through a complete different retention cycle. So when we kick off the retention workflows here, it apply that specific to those specific stakeholders coming into account, and we remediate anything which is meeting all the violations and the risks with these. Finally, and the last step where you see, by doing all this, we are meeting all the compliance requirements, we are avoiding any fines and reduce any unnecessary storage costs, and thus we are kind of giving you a very clean and cleansed environment. That's a simple workflow. And here is a screenshot of how the tool would look like and the user interface where we can define the policies. And you can see these small little icons with respect to the policy type, where we see the redundant, obsolete, trivial data being emphasized by a skeleton fish. And we also have filers keepers. We also have legal hold and other opportunities there. So different policy types that you can create with respect to different domains. And every policy owner can define their own terms in terms of how long the retention period is. For example, if it's a specific kind of data, we're going to hold it for 2 years, whereas medical data, I'm going to hold it for 7 years, banking data, maybe 2 years. So we do have the capability of defining all these policies and the timelines on it. And once that timeline condition criteria is met, we kind of show the reflection in terms of how the output would look like. From there, you have the choices to send it to deletion, send it to remediation, export it, run it through your own approval cycle, run it through all the safety nets, and finally get it to a point where you're able to conclude it with respect to how you create your own retention cycle. All right. I know I have given lots of information at this end. With this, I'll halt from the big end side, and I'll give it to Vana for the filers keeper side, where he's going to give you an insight for the defensible retention and deletion, and where do you start. So over to you, Vana.
All right, thank you, Sai, and that's very insightful. And I also want to say that we're super proud to partner with BigID and to be able to kind of push our retention periods into BigID. And I don't know if everybody could see, but in the slide that was presented before, it had a little filers keepers logo on the screen, and that's actually then a retention period that comes from filers keepers and gets into BigID. And I think it's pretty revolutionary because a lot of companies come to us and say, I have no idea if this is even possible, and I think this is a very good demonstration that it is in fact possible to build a retention schedule and to then implement that into your systems, whether they are structured or unstructured. Yeah, super excited about that part. It was a dream that my co-founder and I started on over a decade ago, and now it's a reality. All was well until the general data protection regulation arrived. And well, what you can't see on this picture is actually that this is the Titanic, and there is an iceberg which is now blocked by my own logo. So that's the reason why you're seeing this. I always mentioned it in every single presentation that I do, and those who know me are super tired of hearing this, but it's all about real compliance. And what you're seeing here is the final session of the European Parliament discussing the GDPR, and it didn't matter what kind of political party was represented. All the speakers that night were super relieved that the GDPR was finally going to be approved, the most beloved piece of legislation. But there was one thing they repeated over and over and over I think it was in 2015, that they said that we want real compliance. This is not just a paper exercise. It needs to become real within everybody's systems. So that's kind of like what's kind of the thought that I wake up every single morning with. How do we get this real within systems? And you can see that the regulators and whether they are at EU level or at national level, they're all super serious about this. Whether it's within Europe or outside of Europe, it has had a huge rippling effect, and everybody is kind of taking data retention on board in their enforcement. So just for example, there was this EDPB, so the European Data Protection Board report on AI a few months ago. And, retention was named the key risk, essentially, in that whole report. And that, you can keep your data too long. And then AI can do all kinds of stuff with that data, and learn stuff and take action perhaps on, and that would impact individuals' lives. So really, one of the things that it's saying is like you need to have a clear retention policy. Yeah. So it's in the guidance, it's in actual enforcement. For example, it goes beyond Europe. Yes. So here, Australia and China. Australia did a sweep of 50 retailers, and that you need to keep records, basically. China has clarified in their cross-border data transfer rules that retention is one of those very important topics. In China, lawyers are split 50-50, and everybody's torn between keeping data very long or very short. Nobody knows the answer anymore. But there's one thing is that they are all very, very afraid of the regulator, and getting it wrong. Yeah. So if you need to talk to your Chinese counsel now, please do so, because I think they will know best what's best for you. It's not just Europe. The US is following in lockstep, actually. We have in California the CPRA, everybody knows it. It introduced the first rule that says that data should be kept no longer than necessary for the US. But that rule has now also been adopted in Colorado and in Minnesota and in Virginia. And then we have something that's called no longer required to be retained. It's a different type of standard, but I don't know what you guys think of this, but it sounds similar. You could, at least construe it in a similar manner. And that's in Arkansas, Oregon, Utah, and I guess a few more states by now. It's definitely has changed a lot in the US. And in the past, people would just look at all the different state laws and federal law, and they would just pick the longest retention period they could find. Yeah, so let's say, Wyoming has 10 years. Okay, then that should be the one. Now they can't do that anymore, because maybe California says 3 years. California doesn't care any longer that Wyoming has a 10-year retention period, because Californian law says no longer than necessary. So you have to probably go very, very granular here with your compliance. And the funny bit is that also the FTC within the US has been wined and dined for many years by the Europeans, and now is practically reading an entire federal privacy law. They don't have one yet, but they're just interpreting their Section 5 of the FTC Act as containing a complete privacy law, basically. So they're actually actively enforcing retention rules. They did that in GoodRx, Drizzly, Cafe Press, and a host of enforcement orders, where they basically said, hey, you guys, you should have, when you touch any data that deals with consumers, you should have a retention policy and you should implement it, very simply put. Yeah. And the one thing that they do have control over are the FTC COPPA rules. So that has to do with the Children Online Safety and Privacy Protection Act. And there they actually have included a no longer than necessary rule for anyone touching the personal data, personal information of children. The EU also keeps powering on. That's my last slide on everything that could go wrong. I am a recovering lawyer, guys. So, but the EU just keeps powering on, and by now, this is a recent enforcement announcement by the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, on the 14th of January. And they have issued fines on two companies, together 42 million. It was for a data breach, but what the CNIL does with every single enforcement is they come in because of a data breach or because of a complaint, and one of the first questions they ask is, how old is this data, and why are you keeping this long, etc. So part of this sanction was the fact that the companies were keeping data well beyond the legal life cycle of the data. And it's kind of like a common thing, and it seems like everybody's failing the test, and and everybody in France is still getting used to the enforcement that will come their way. The CNIL is the market leader in data retention enforcement, but definitely the Danish and some others are really trying to contest there. Yeah. So yeah. The challenge of true deletion is that it is irreversible and auditable. So once it's gone, it's gone. And that's why a lot of companies come to me and go, well, what if we just go for a soft deletion? Like we just actually look it up for a while and then we get rid of it. It's a great security mechanism, I'm all up for it, but it's not actual deletion under privacy law. When it's gone, it's gone. Auditable is actually where you can attest that you have gone through certain steps, and that there might be a bit of like an electronic signature at the end, attesting to the fact that you have gone through the steps, and that means by definition that the data is actually gone. Yeah, and so you can prove that you have deleted the data. And the same accounts for anonymization. Also should be irreversible and auditable. Anonymization is way harder than deletion, because the irreversible nature is very contextual. So we can say, oh, we'll remove the name and some other stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will never be able to re-identify someone in that data set. So there is a body of scientific research and also guidance now from regulators that goes back, I think, 3-4 decades, where people can show that if you match two data sets together, there's a considerable risk of re-identification of someone. So this is really something to be wary about. I'm still a big proponent, by the way, of anonymization, but it is something to test well. So where do you start? Well, we always say we'll start by building a retention schedule and then be informed by the rules in a given country or state. Try to then make it easy for you and calculate what's the most optimal retention period given all those countries and states you're in. What is the residual risk there? Where is there a country with longer minimum, shorter maximum? Have a solid basis, basically. Keep that up to date so that you really know you can rely on your schedule, and it becomes a very good defense, against such a enforcement action. But building a retention schedule is definitely not enough. You need more. And when you start implementing, I think you should start thinking with about the exceptions first. I'm very pleased to also see in Sai's story that you guys are dealing also with legal holds. I think you should first think about, okay, what can we absolutely not delete? What do we need to hold? Because there is a litigation, a legal case in front of the courts, or a tax audit or something, and we need to hold on to all of these records. And a legal hold will kind of supersede the retention schedule, put it on hold, and then once it's over, once the hold is lifted, because the litigation is over, then the normal retention period starts running again, and you have to compare it to that. The whole question is like, do you have a proper tool? Do you have a full inventory of all the legal holds? Do you know who the custodians are? And oh, there's a legacy hold. Have you lifted it? Because a lot of companies are really good at issuing a legal hold, but they forget to lift it afterwards, which also will lead to non-compliance. So this is a very important first step, I would say. I'm also happy to learn after this how Peter and his team look at this and deal with this. And then I think the last thing that I wanted to look into is well, the second to last thing that I want to look into is like, to prioritize, not to prioritize. I know that, BigID offers this wonderful Swiss Army knife of a tool, but you have to prioritize when you start using BigID to start fixing your systems. So you need to kind of make a little roadmap of where you start and how you continue then. And what we see nowadays is a lot of companies, they start by fixing their HR system first. Yeah, so they look into the HRM system, and it's high risk. It's employee data. It's usually a lot of data, but it scores a bit lower on the controversiality scale, because it's not dealing with any customers or anything, and it doesn't have to deal with your the way you make money in a way. And then we see that as soon or large structured systems, ERPs, CRMs, the unstructured systems are very doable as well, but they are a bit more tricky because they are unstructured. So you need to kind of figure out more what the data is about and what the dependencies are on that data. We always say, don't promise your leadership that you're going to tackle all the problems, because you'll set yourself up for failure. What we see that two approaches usually exist after you've done your first system. One is to go for the top systems and do them in a sequence, and the other option is to actually just go by function and to say, well, we've done our HRM system, why don't we have another look at all the upstream and downstream systems there in HR, so that we can go function by function, because we got momentum there now. When you map a retention schedule to a system, you're going to run into like 3 different types of problems. The first one is the scope difference between the schedule and the system. A retention schedule, good one, would be technology neutral. So if you map that to a system, the system can have a different type of scope. So think about Workday, for example. They group sick leave and regular leave, and they call it absence. But in the law, there might be different retention periods for sick leave and regular leave. Workday just doesn't care about that. There can be data dependency. SAP is notorious there. I want to delete A, but I cannot delete A without deleting B. And A and B have different retention periods. What are we going to do? And sometimes the triggers, the law says end of fiscal year. The system says, I don't know what a fiscal year is. So then you need to kind of reconcile that in another way, or just mention the residual risk to your leadership. So those are some thoughts, and we love these kind of little puzzles and to solve them. I'm also wondering if Peter, who's next, has seen any of these issues that I've just discussed about.
All right. Thanks, Vani. It's I'm going to try to put in the piece of the puzzle that we can provide. I'm going to do it. My ambition is to do it on a high level and understandable. But basically, where is your sensitive information? That's the key issue we work with, and that's what we always bring with us. The angle we come from, you're all familiar with this one, but just to understand where we come from, we're kind of in a perfect storm here, where cyber threats, as we all know, is not decreasing, they're increasing. We had to add on the dependency we have on digital services, and out of that perspective, it doesn't really matter if my service that I rely on stops working because of a hacker attack or a flooding in a data center. It's not good that stops working. The society's response to this is to regulate, make new laws, trying to force organization to work with information security and compliance. These two is just one of them. It's about 10 at the moment being installed or just been installed. And if you look at on a horizon of 3-4 years, that's probably up to 50. So this is also a trend that is increasing. And then you have the fun side of things, which is innovation, where AI is in the lead at this point in time. And of course, we're going to use AI. There's a lot to be gained of using AI, but let's do it in a proper way, and let's avoid the pit holes that you may fall in when you start to install and use the AI. For instance, if you let everyone access all the information, bad things may happen. So why is it like that? Where from our point of view, if you have a specific type of information, like protected identity, for instance, that is properly stored in a system which is purpose-built. In this example, it's the HR system. It's protected. We have it encrypted. We have full control over who can access it. It's all hunky-dory. It's the way it's supposed to be. But someone sooner or later picks up a document, opens a document in, for instance, Word, and now we have a copy of Microsoft 365, for instance. You maybe email something to someone. Maybe it's contractual issues that needs to be agreed upon. Now we have a copy in the email system. You have an internal meeting with your colleagues over, for instance, Teams, and now you have traces in Teams, and you turn on your own AI solution, and you have traces in that solution as well. So now all of a sudden you have 5 copies of the same type of information, whereof 4 are potentially not protected. And with a very high likelihood, the organization out there do not have control over the 4 copies. And this is basically the main challenge we try to address. And if you add on all other types of information you have and all other types of information you have which is potentially sensitive, then the picture becomes pretty clear that this is maybe not always so easy to keep control over. The consequence of this, and this is an example from the AI world, it doesn't really matter if it's a use of AI or if it's compliance or if it's information security. The fundamentals are the same, but if you have traces of bits and pieces in your IT infrastructure that you don't have control over, which is shared in a way that it wasn't supposed to be shared, then you may have a use of this information that was not intended. For instance, if you turn on AI and start to ask AI for warning letters, who got what warning letters, or maybe internal economical financial information relating to the next quarterly report, which is not public yet, enabling potentially inside trading, or maybe the use case which we in our market see as the #1 driver right now, which is protected identity for the public sector. So it's a matter of keeping control over the information, which may not be that easy. I overheard someone on stage. I proudly stole this sentence, but someone on stage saying that 80% of the total information in the world is created the last 2 years. The time to double right now is 1.5 years. So just the sheer amount of information makes is the foundation of the problem, if you will. What we have done is try to automate the process, and we're trying to make it as easy for customer as possible to work with these things. The idea is that you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a big team to work with this issue in order to solve them. So what we built is our own platform. We are a BigID partner, so we have our own IP, and we're using parts of what BigID do. In our opinion, BigID is an excellent solution for what it does. We've done a lot of research, and we decided on BigID basically. But if you compare us to BigID, BigID is a huge box of various different tools, if you will, where we have built purpose-built solutions for specific problems. So what we have in our platform is a policy manager, where the customer easily can set up the framework what should it look like? And this might be correlated to NIS2, it might be correlated to retention, it might be correlated to any other legal frameworks, or simply to identify irrelevant information that should be archived or just deleted. So we have the policy manager. Parallel to that, we actually scan the customer environment for information. Basically, we draw the map. What type of information resides where? Out of all the information I have, what is sensitive, and from what perspective? And the most important question of them all: how is it processed right now? Is it protected? Is it encrypted? Is it shared? Who is it shared with? When was it shared with someone, and so on and so forth. By comparing the scanned result, i.e. the reality, with the policy and the policy manager, i.e. what should it actually look like, we automate deviations to set policy. And we do it in a prioritized way. So I don't think anyone out there is going to be happy with a list of 163 risks that they have to work with. What will help the organization out there is a prioritized list where you have clearly what 2, 3, 4 deviations, risks do I actually have to work with right now, and which one can I actually work with in the next cycle when I come back here. We have also built our own metadata catalog, and the purpose of that is to be able to twist and turn the information in a gazillion different ways, depending on what the customer wants to do right now. So if we compare our solution to filerskeepers, we can automate information that is old based on the policy manager, i.e. should we actually store medical journals, medical records longer than 7 years or 10 years and 5 years and so on. But we do not at all have the same nice process support that filerskeeper have for retention schedules and so on and so forth. But we are happy to provide that automation piece of the puzzle to filerskeepers or filerskeepers customers. On top of this, we also have a module for gap analysis, and we have a module for risk analysis. And the whole idea there, the red thread, is to actually set up your policy. What should it look like? You scan the environment and automate the insights of what deviation to set policies you have. And if you bring the result from the gap analysis, which is basically known risks on some level, together with the scanning, which is basically unknown risks, and you feed that into the risk analyzing process, you will have risk analyzing process which is very much built on reality and real risks. So that's the whole idea and the red thread. Now, how do we do this? Well, we have our platform, as I said, and we connect it to the customer environment. We start to scan, and what we do during the scan is to identify what information do the customer have in the environment, and not necessarily just social security number, names, IBAN number, so on and so forth, but the context, the more complex level of information, i.e. this social security number is actually in an employment agreement or medical record or whatever it might be. We also have a process to identify dark data, meaning data that the customer themselves do not know they have. And that is, to our experience, that's quite a large chunk of the data stored. So what information? We also identify where is it? Do we have copies spread? And if so, where? Who or what have access to this information? The sensitivity labeling, the sensitivity level. And in this process, if the customer wants to, we also auto-label the information, meaning that this is a sensitivity labeling ends up in the metadata of the document. So regardless of where this information actually ends up, the sensitivity level will always be together with the information. We scan the environment, we compare it with what it should look like, and thereby we automate potential violations. And it all comes down to what risks do I have in a prioritized way? What risk can I assume? What risks do I have to work with here and now? This is an ongoing process, of course, because information is changed on a daily basis. It's created on a daily basis. So we like to start that process with drawing the map. What information do I have where? How sensitive is it? And how is it processed? And if the customer wants, we auto-label that information as well. We measure the compliance to set frameworks simply by comparing the scan result to the set policy. And the value of this is, I mean, we've been working with this long enough to understand that automated classification do not sell. What sell is actually the use case, depending on what the customer wants to do. And the three most common use cases we have at this point in time is retention. Retention, the use of secure AI, meaning what will you allow AI to access or not, and increase security and compliance. So just a quick example. After we've done our thing with a customer, this example is, as you see, built on PI. What we do during this process, the result after our scan is that we categorized and classified the information, in this case in 3 different sensitivity labels, sensitivity levels. We will also find normally, and I say always, quite a big chunk of unknown data, dark data. If the customer wants to, we can classify and auto-label that too. If we take medical records as an example here, during the scan we found this particular type of information in 3 different systems. We will also understand if it's obsolete, meaning should we store medical records more than 5 years, 7 years, 1 year, whatever it is. We will understand if it's relevant or not, who or what have access to this information, and if there are any policy violations. For instance, our information policy, our information security policy states that medical records should not be emailed, but during the scan we actually found medical records in the email, hence it's a policy violation. So if I sum on what we do, again, we're trying to make the world as easy as possible for the users. We're working with automation of policy breaches, i.e. what risks do you have potentially. Data-driven compliance, and it doesn't matter if it's DORA needs to GDPR or whatever it is, it's just something that we measure against. We auto-label, auto-tag data, meaning that you will always have control over the information, no matter, regardless of where it ends up. And we turn manual, time-consuming processes to automated processes. This is a great base for deletion and archiving, but it's not at all the retention schedule that filerskeepers do. But it's a fundamental value of that. And manual processes are simply not possible. We have
I can definitely second that, by the way, Peter. So it's a very complementary solution, and manual might be possible for one system, and then everybody is done, and the problem is so much bigger. You have a whole IT landscape and decades of legacy to fix, basically, and it's legacy and it's future facing. So yeah, like you said, the data doubles every 1.5 years. What are you going to do?
It's correct, and I can only agree to what you say. And running around, and it's better to classify manually than not classifying at all. But considering the amount of information created every day and what you have in the history, it's not going to, you're never going to cross the finish line. Yeah. It's also better to classify on a system level than don't classify at all. But it's also not enough, because the information will be spread to other systems than what it is meant to be. So that's basically our take on the whole thing. That's our piece of the puzzle. We try to be very niched. We want to help our customers to get control over their information, hence the name Nordic Information Control, or NIC, as we like to call us. And I hope that was decently clear.
And question, Peter, what do you think is the one step that companies should take to go from, towards enforcement of retention, basically, in their system? Where should they start?
Well, from our angle, and we try to push this in every single meeting we have. I mean, if you look at the legal frameworks you have, take these two for an example. You have a lot of elements that you have to comply to. But regardless what element you're trying to comply to, the cornerstone is to understand what information do I have, what is sensitive, and how is that processed. I mean, you can go out and buy an education package and start to educate your staff, and it's not wrong, but it's better if you understand where do our organization actually, where are the problems, what are our users doing wrong, and you focus on that type of education. If that makes sense, if that answers the question.
Yeah.
So I say control your information, understand what you have.
Yeah. No, there's no wrong answer here. And Sai, the same question for you. What do you think the customers should do besides call you? Yeah.
They have to do their own due diligence, ensure that the organization is being kept cleansed and clean. And of course, manual efforts, as you said, may leave lots of gaps in terms of what's being achieved. So it's always a hindrance to ensure that it's all clean and good.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's great to hear. I think I can second that. Of course, if you don't have a retention schedule, you're not going to implement anything. So I always say start with the retention schedule. Also to kind of build a bit of momentum and kind of like some cross-function support basically for what you're trying to achieve. And this is the great thing of technology nowadays. It is possible, and I'm a super optimistic person. We're a super optimistic company. I do believe that we will have this completely resolved in the next 2 to 3 years. So to say. So that's you can quote me on that. So Sai, you want to wrap up? Yeah.
It's been a great session. I'm sure there's a lot for the audience to take away from here, and we would like to, of course, hear a lot from you in terms of any questions that you have, anything that you want to share with us, comments, feedback, and likewise, we'll look forward to more of these sessions in future. And if you wanted to look at more information about us, here are the QR codes that you can scan to something in the near future. With that, we call it a good day, and have a wonderful day.